Look at the sheer scale of the first-century Roman Empire. The distance from Jerusalem to the province of Illyricum spans over 1,000 miles of mountains and sea. For a grassroots movement, this geography was a logistical dead end. The man leading this effort, the Apostle Paul, didn't have the resources of a government official. He was a working-class tent maker who spent his days sewing heavy canvas just to pay for his next meal and a place to sleep. There was a hard limit to what one person could do. If the movement relied on Paul personally visiting every single village and town, the entire mission would eventually hit a ceiling and vanish the moment he died. To bypass this, Paul used a strategy called Zentrum's mission. Instead of attempting to walk to every person in the empire, he targeted specific urban centers to build a self-replicating network of local leaders. This approach meant the growth of the church was no longer tied to Paul's physical presence or his lifespan. He focused on creating local hubs that could survive and expand entirely on their own. Paul deliberately ignored the small, isolated villages of the empire. He exclusively targeted major cosmopolitan crossroads, cities that functioned as commercial and political hubs where ideas could spread rapidly. Corinth was the ultimate testing ground, a rebuilt Roman colony with 2 major harbors, positioned to control regional trade across the isthmus. But the city was also a cultural pressure cooker. It was crowded with shrines to deities like Apollo and Aphrodite, marked by religious pluralism and a reputation for extreme sexual licentiousness. This high-traffic environment was exactly why Paul chose it. If he could build a core of leaders in a chaotic center like Corinth, the message would naturally radiate outward along established trade routes to the surrounding regions. While Paul usually began by preaching in local synagogues, he needed a different environment to actually develop leaders. He moved his focus into the private homes of his new converts. A first-century Roman household was a micro-community with a pre-existing hierarchy, led by a head of household managing family and workers. By converting leaders like Crispus, Paul gained a ready-made framework, turning the house into a training ground. After establishing these house churches, Paul did something radical. He left. He moved on to the next city and delegated the task of reaching the surrounding provincial towns entirely to these local leaders. By stepping away, Paul forced these new believers to take ownership. They shifted from being followers under Paul's direct supervision to being autonomous leaders responsible for their own mission. But the system had a major vulnerability. These newly elevated leaders were often spiritually immature, still influenced by the competitive, toxic culture of the cities they lived in. In Corinth, this led to a series of internal breakdowns. The community splintered into rival factions, taking each other to court and sliding back into immoral habits. While Paul was stationed hundreds of miles away in Ephesus, he had to figure out how to mentor them from a distance. His solution was a series of letters, what we now call 1st and 2nd Corinthians. These letters functioned as a form of remote crisis intervention. Writing from Ephesus, Paul addressed specific legal battles, sexual scandals, and leadership disputes, providing guidance without being physically in the room. By using these letters and sending trusted co-workers like Timothy as proxies, Paul maintained a strict system of mentorship. He held them accountable while still allowing them to manage their own local communities. This decentralized strategy produced a result that would have been impossible for one person alone. In less than 10 years, Paul successfully established a self-sustaining network across multiple Roman provinces. The map reveals a hub-and-spoke model. By planting deep roots in major cities, Paul created an empire-wide web that no longer depended on his physical presence to survive or expand. He repeated this process in massive commercial centers like Ephesus. These grand cities served as anchor points, ensuring that if one church faced persecution or failure, the rest of the network would remain standing. This entire system relied on a significant amount of trust. Paul was handing over the future of his mission to people he had only known for a year or two, betting that local empowerment was more effective than top-down control. It shows that a movement only truly scales when the founder is willing to let go. By turning his converts into autonomous leaders, Paul ensured that the message didn't just reach the next city, it reached the next several centuries.